Luke here from Smart ASMR. Today I'm going to be doing my NFL Week 13 recap video and my Week 14 picks. Thank you for being here today, and I hope you enjoy the video. The first game I'll be talking about is the New Orleans Saints versus the Atlanta Falcons. The Saints ended up defeating the Falcons 21-16. The Saints are now 10-2 on the season, and the Falcons fall to 4-8. In this game, the Saints held the lead all game. They were up 14-9 at the half, and they were up 21-9 after the third quarter. And then the Falcons ended up scoring on a Russell Gage 10-yard touchdown catch with 7 minutes and 43 seconds left, which made the score 21-16. But then the Saints ended up holding on for the win, so they ended up getting their sweep on the Falcons this year. For the Saints stats, Taysom Hill went 27 of 37 for 232 yards. He had 2 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. He also had 14 carries for 83 yards. He's starting to look more comfortable every game in the offense as the starting quarterback. Alvin Kamara had 15 carries for 88 yards and a touchdown. Michael Thomas had 9 catches for 105 yards. He continues to be Taysom Hill's favorite target. Tre'Quan Smith had 3 catches for 42 yards and a touchdown. Emmanuel Sanders had 5 catches for 39 yards. Jared Cook had 3 catches for 28 yards and a touchdown. And for the Saints defense, David Onyemata, Trey Hendrickson, and Carl Granderson each had 1 sack. For the Falcons stats, Matt Ryan went 19 of 39 for 273 yards. He had 1 touchdown and 0 interceptions. Ito Smith had 8 carries for 36 yards. Calvin Ridley had 5 catches for 108 yards. Julio Jones had 6 catches for 94 yards. He's not going to be playing in the next upcoming game due to his hamstring injury. Russell Gage had 4 catches for 51 yards and a touchdown. Stephen Means had 2 sacks for the Falcons defense. And Younghoe Koo went 3 for 3 on his field goals on the day. He's continuing to show that he's a clutch kicker for the NFL. I believe he only missed 1 field goal on the season so far. He had a long of 53 yards, and all these field goals were in the first half. Up next, I'll be talking about the Cleveland Browns at the Tennessee Titans. The Browns ended up defeating the Titans 41-35 in a game that ended up looking closer than how it felt. The Browns are now 9-3 on the season, where the Titans fall to 8-4. The Titans had 3 turnovers in this game, compared to the Browns' 1 turnover. The Browns were up 38-7 at the half, so that's why it seemed like a bigger blowout than what the final score indicated. The Titans scored 4 touchdowns then in the second half to make the game look closer, and 2 of these touchdowns were with the last 1 minute and 23 seconds left in the game for the Titans. One of the opportunities was given to the Titans at the end to score again, because Baker Mayfield ended up fumbling on the Browns' possession towards the end. But it was good to see the Titans have fight in them for the whole game after being down 38-7 at half. For the Browns stats, Baker Mayfield went 25 of 33 for 334 yards. He had 4 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. Those 4 touchdowns were all in the first half, so he had a really good game. 18 carries for 80 yards and a touchdown, and 1 catch for 26 yards. Rashard Higgins had 6 catches for 95 yards and a touchdown. Donovan Peoples-Jones had 2 catches for 92 yards and a touchdown. Jarvis Landry had 8 catches for 62 yards and a touchdown. One of their offensive linemen also got in on the fun. Kendall Lamb, he's 6'6" and 310 pounds. He had a 1-yard touchdown catch in the game, so that was fun to see. And for the Browns defense, Malcolm Smith, Myles Garrett, and Larry Ogunjobi had sacks, and MJ Stewart had an interception. For the Titans stats, Ryan Tannehill went 29 of 45 for 389 yards. He had 3 touchdowns and 1 interception. Derrick Henry had 15 carries for 60 yards, and he also lost a fumble, which was his first lost fumble of the season. So, he was held in check by the Browns defense today. Jeremy McNichols had 2 carries for 2 yards and a touchdown. Corey Davis really balled out and had 11 catches for 182 yards and a touchdown. A.J. Brown had 4 catches for 87 yards, and he also lost a fumble. Anthony Ferkser had 5 catches for 51 yards. Nicole Pruitt had a 22-yard touchdown catch, and Cameron Batson had 3 catches for 14 yards and a touchdown. Next up, we'll be talking about the Detroit Lions at the Chicago Bears. The Lions ended up defeating the Bears 34-30 in a thrilling game. I would say either this was the game of the week or the Raiders and Jets. It's gotta be a close tie. As a Bears fan, this was a shocking game to watch, as it looked like the Bears were gonna win. But the Lions ended up coming back in this game at the end. The Lions are now 5-7 on the season, and the Bears are also 5-7. In this game, the Bears are up 23-13 after a David Montgomery 4-yard touchdown near the end of the first half, and the Bears led all game until the last 1 minute and 37 seconds, once Adrian Peterson scored on a 5-yard touchdown run after a Romeo Okwara strip sack on Mitch Trubisky on 3rd down. The Lions were down 20-30 until the 2 minute and 18 second mark in the game, where they made it 27-30. So it looked like the Lions weren't going to win the game until they gave themselves a chance at that part of the game. And then after the Lions took the 34-30 lead at the 1:37 mark left in the game, like I said before, the Bears got the ball back and had a chance to drive down the field. They were moving the ball down the field well, and they made it all the way to the Lions' 20-yard line until they were stopped on a 4th and 1 with 16 seconds remaining. So Darrell Bevell got his first NFL win as head coach. For the Lions stats, Matthew Stafford went 27-42 for 402 yards. He had 3 touchdowns and 1 interception. Adrian Peterson had 16 carries for 57 yards and 2 touchdowns. DeAndre Swift didn't play in this game, and Kenny Golladay didn't play as well. So they were missing a couple of key offensive players. Marvin Jones had 8 catches for 116 yards and a touchdown. TJ Hawkinson had 7 catches for 84 yards. Quintez Cephas had 2 catches for 63 yards and a touchdown. Danny Amendola had 3 catches for 62 yards. Jesse James had a 9-yard touchdown catch. And for the Lions defense, Romeo Okwara had a strip sack, and Everson Griffin had a sack as well. For the Bears stats, Mitchell Trubisky went 26 of 34 for 267 yards. He had 1 touchdown and 0 interceptions. And he also lost that fumble at the end of the game, like I was saying. David Montgomery had 17 carries for 72 yards and 2 touchdowns and 4 catches for 39 yards. His productivity has really been picking up these past couple of games, so that's good to see from him. Cordero Patterson had 10 carries for 59 yards and a touchdown. Allen Robinson had 6 catches for 75 yards. Anthony Miller had 5 catches for 56 yards. Cole Kmet had 5 catches for 37 yards and a touchdown. It's cool to see Cole Kmet play for the Bears because he grew up as a Bears fan, so he's living the dream of playing for them. And for the Bears defense, Barkevius Mingo had a sack and Bilal Nichols had a sack and an interception. Now we'll be talking about the Cincinnati Bengals at the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins ended up defeating the Bengals 19-7. The Bengals are now 2-9-1, and the Dolphins are 8-4. The Bengals were up 7-0 at the end of the first quarter in this game. Then the Dolphins scored 19 unanswered points to win the game. They took the lead in the third quarter mark when Mike Gesicki had a 5-yard touchdown catch, and they never looked back after that. For the Bengals stats, Brandon Allen went 11 of 19 for 153 yards. He had 1 touchdown and 1 interception. Ryan Finley also went into the game and went 6 of 7 for 40 yards and threw an interception. Giovanni Bernard had 12 carries for 30 yards. Tyler Boyd had a 72-yard touchdown catch. T. Higgins had 5 catches for 56 yards. And Drew Sample had 7 catches for 49 yards. For the Dolphins stats, Tua Tagovailoa went 26 of 39 for 296 yards. He had 1 touchdown and 0 interceptions. Myles Gaskin had 21 carries for 90 yards and 2 catches for 51 yards. Mike Gesicki had 9 catches for 88 yards and a touchdown. It seems like he's always scoring touchdowns for the Dolphins. For the Dolphins defense, they really stepped up today. Kyle Van Noy had 3 sacks. Shaq Lawson had 2 sacks. Zach Seiler had 1 sack. And Xavier Howard and Nick Needham had interceptions. Xavier Howard and Tyler Boyd ended up getting ejected in this game for throwing punches, and Jason Sanders went 4 for 4 on his field goals with a long of 48 yards. Next up, we'll be talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings ended up defeating the Jaguars in overtime, 27-24. The Jaguars are now 1-11, and the Vikings improved to 6-6, and now grab that 7th playoff spot for the wild card in the NFC playoff race. The Jags had the lead in this game until the 3-minute and 27-second mark left in the third quarter, when the Vikings then took a 19-16 lead from a 20-yard touchdown by Justin Jefferson. The Jags are then down to the Vikings 24-16 until the 1-minute and 8-second mark left in the fourth quarter, when they tied the game, and they succeeded on the 2-point conversion on a pass to Colin Johnson. This game ended up going into overtime after that, and the Vikings ended up kicking a 23-yard field goal to win the game with 1 minute and 49 seconds left in the overtime period. For the Jaguars stats, Mike Glennon went 28 of 42 for 280 yards. He had 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions, and he also lost a fumble in the game. So he had a lot of turnovers. James Robinson had 18 carries for 78 yards and a touchdown, and 6 catches for 30 yards. So he's continuing to impress his rookie season as an undrafted free agent. Colin Johnson had 4 catches for 66 yards, and he also got that 2-point conversion I was talking about at the end of the game for the Jags to send it into overtime. Tyler Eifert had 6 catches for 45 yards. Laviska Shenault had 3 catches for 38 yards and a touchdown, and 2 carries for 30 yards. For the Jags defense, Dewan Smoot had 2 sacks, Daniel Aquale had 1 sack, and Joe Schobert had a sack and an interception, which he returned 43 yards for a touchdown. And Chase McLaughlin went 1 for 2 on his field goals, and he also missed an extra point. It seemed like a lot of kickers missed their extra points during this week of the NFL. It was crazy to see. For the Vikings stats, Kirk Cousins went 28 of 43 for 305 yards. He had 3 touchdowns and 1 interception. Dalvin Cook had 32 carries for 120 yards and 6 catches for 59 yards. Justin Jefferson is continuing to look impressive his rookie season. He had 9 catches for 121 yards and a touchdown. He now has 1,039 yards and 7 touchdowns on the season. He's leading all rookies for receiving yards. Adam Thielen had 8 catches for 75 yards and a touchdown. C.J. Ham had a 12-yard touchdown catch. And for the defense, Harrison Smith and Cameron Dantzler had interceptions, and Ifeadi Odenigbo registered a safety when he sacked Glennon in the end zone. And Dan Bailey went 2 for 3 on his field goals. He missed 2 extra points in this game, and he missed a 51-yard game winner, which would have avoided the game from going into overtime. And he made a 23-yard game winner in overtime, though, like I said, so he ended up being clutch when it mattered at the end. But it was a short field goal, so that helped. Now I'll be talking about the Indianapolis Colts at the Houston Texans. The Colts ended up winning a close game, 26-20, over the Texans. The Colts are now 8-4, and the Texans fall to 4-8. The Colts were up 24-20 at the end of the first half, and the only point action in the second half was a safety that was recorded by Justin Houston for the Colts off a sack with 6:02 left in the fourth quarter. For the Colts stats, Phillip Rivers went 27 of 35 for 285 yards. He had 2 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. Jonathan Taylor had 13 carries for 91 yards and 3 catches for 44 yards and a touchdown. So he was used the most in the Colts running back committee today. Nyheim Hines had 6 carries for 10 yards and a touchdown. T.Y. Hilton is starting to improve his productivity and get on the same page with Phillip Rivers. He had 8 catches for 110 yards and a touchdown. Michael Pittman Jr. had 5 catches for 46 yards. And for the Colts defense, Justin Houston had 3 sacks, including that safety registered in the fourth quarter. DeForest Buckner had 2 sacks, and Kenny Moore had an interception. For the Texans, Deshaun Watson went 26 of 38 for 341 yards. He had 0 touchdowns and 1 interception, and he had 7 carries for 38 yards and a touchdown. David Johnson had 10 carries for 44 yards and a touchdown. Kiki Kuti really made up for the loss of Will Fuller and had 8 catches for 141 yards. Chad Hansen had 5 catches for 101 yards. Brandon Cooks had 5 catches for 65 yards. And for the Texans defense, J.J. Watt, A.J. Moore, and Jacob Martin all registered sacks. So this was a big win for the Colts because now they're 8-4 and the Titans are 8-4 as well in the division, so it puts them within striking distance of taking the division again. Now we'll be talking about the Las Vegas Raiders at the New York Jets. This was the other game I was saying was probably tied for my game of the week with the Lions and Bears game. The Raiders ended up prevailing in this game 31-28 on a touchdown score late in the fourth quarter, which I'll tell you about in a second. The Raiders are now 7-5 and the Jets fall to 0-12. The Jets are up 28-24 with 5:34 remaining after Ty Johnson's 1-yard touchdown run. Then the Jets came up with a 4th down stop versus the Raiders, which they started celebrating because they thought they were going to win the game, or they had a really high chance to win it after that point. But then they had to punt the ball after being stopped on offense with 35 seconds left, and they left enough time for Derek Carr to throw a game-winning touchdown pass with 5 seconds left on the clock once they scored the touchdown. So it was such a heartbreaker for the Jets to see them lose, especially now that they fall to 0-12. The game-winning pass went to Henry Ruggs, the speedster receiver. It was a 46-yard touchdown catch to win the game. The Jets defensive coordinator ended up sending the house on a blitz, which left one-on-one coverage on Henry Ruggs, which wasn't a good idea because at this point you're just preventing anything in the end zone. But Henry Ruggs ended up getting by his defender for an easy touchdown. So that was not a good call by the defensive coordinator Greg Williams, who ended up getting fired from a result of that play. For the Raiders stats, Derek Carr went 28 of 47 for 381 yards. He had 3 touchdowns and 1 interception, and 2 carries for 5 yards and a touchdown. Darren Waller had 13 catches for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. He scored the 5th most fantasy points ever by a tight end. He was on my fantasy team, so I was really happy to see his productivity this week. Henry Ruggs had 3 catches for 84 yards and a touchdown, including that 46-yard game-winning touchdown at the end. Hunter Renfrow had 4 catches for 47 yards. And for the defense, Clelin Ferrell had 2 sacks, Nicholas Morrow had 1 sack, and Trayvon Mullen had an interception. For the Jets stats, Sam Darnold went 14 of 23 for 186 yards. He had 2 touchdowns and 1 interception, and he had 3 carries for 26 yards and a touchdown. Ty Johnson had 22 carries for 104 yards and a touchdown. This was his first career touchdown. Josh Adams had 8 carries for 74 yards. Jamison Crowder had 5 catches for 47 yards and 2 touchdowns. Denzel Mims had 2 catches for 40 yards. And for the Jets defense, Neville Hewitt and Quinnen Williams each had a sack, and Arthur Mollett had an interception. The next game we'll be talking about is the New York Giants at the Seattle Seahawks. This was a major upset game. The New York Giants ended up defeating the Seahawks 17-12, and they were missing Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley, so it was really impressive to see. The Giants moved to 5-7 on the season and are tied on top for the lead of the NFC East. The Seahawks fall to 8-4 and are now tied with the Rams in the top of the division of the NFC West. The Seahawks are up 5-0 at the half in this game, so it was like a baseball score. And this was after a blocked punt by Ryan Neal near the end of the first half. They ended up getting a safety off of that. The Giants then scored 17 points, including 2 Alfred Morris touchdowns. The Seahawks then scored on Chris Carson's 28-yard touchdown catch with 6:09 left to play, which made the score 17-12, with the Giants leading. But then the Giants ended up holding on and defeating the Seahawks in the game. The Giants had a really stellar defensive performance in the game. For the Giants stats, Colt McCoy ended up starting at quarterback, and he got his first win since the 2014 season as a starter. He went 13 of 22 for 105 yards. He had 1 touchdown and 1 interception. Wayne Gallman had 16 carries for 135 yards. He's continuing to be very productive at the running back position. Alfred Morris had 8 carries for 39 yards and a touchdown, and he had a 6-yard touchdown catch. He scored for the first time since the 2018 season, so that must have felt really good for him to score at last. Evan Ingram had 4 catches for 32 yards, and the Giants defense performed really well, like I said. They had 5 sacks, including 2.5 by Leonard Williams, and Darnay Holmes had an interception. For the Seahawks, Russell Wilson went 27 of 43 for 263 yards. He had 1 touchdown and 1 interception. He also had 7 carries for 45 yards. Chris Carson had 13 carries for 65 yards and 3 catches for 45 yards and a touchdown. DK Metcalf had 5 catches for 80 yards. Tyler Lockett had 6 catches for 63 yards. And for the Seahawks defense, Jamal Adams and Benson Mayowa had sacks, and Quandre Diggs had an interception, and Ryan Neal had that blocked punt, which resulted in a safety. Now we'll be talking about the Los Angeles Rams at the Arizona Cardinals. The Rams ended up defeating the Cardinals 38-28 in a big divisional game. This put the Rams at an 8-4 record and tied with the Seahawks in the division. And the Cardinals fall to 6-6 on the season. The Cardinals were up 7-0 after a Dan Arnold 59-yard touchdown catch in the first quarter, but the Rams took the lead at half after a Tyler Higbee 1-yard touchdown catch with 51 seconds left in the first half, and held the lead for the rest of the game after that. For the Rams stats, Jared Goff went 37 of 47 for 351 yards. He had 1 touchdown and 0 interceptions, and he had a rushing touchdown in the game as well. Cam Akers had 21 carries for 72 yards and a touchdown, and he had a 22-yard catch as well. Darrell Henderson had 3 carries for 49 yards and a touchdown. Robert Woods had 10 catches for 85 yards. Cooper Kupp had 8 catches for 73 yards. Tyler Higbee had 4 catches for 24 yards and a touchdown. And for the Rams defense. Justin Hollins and Aaron Donald had sacks, and Troy Hill had an interception, which resulted in a 35-yard pick six. For the Cardinals stats, Kyler Murray went 21 of 39 for 173 yards. He had 3 touchdowns and 1 interception. Kenyon Drake had 10 carries for 49 yards and a touchdown. Dan Arnold had 2 catches for 61 yards and 2 touchdowns. DeAndre Hopkins had 8 catches for 52 yards and a touchdown. And Dennis Gardeck had a sack for the Cardinals. Next up, we'll be talking about the New England Patriots at the Los Angeles Chargers. The Patriots ended up dominating the Chargers and winning 45-0. The Patriots are now 6-6 on the season, and the Chargers fell to 3-9. This is the first time the Chargers got shut out since the 2014 season. The Patriots are up 28-0 after a 44-yard return by Devin McCourty off a blocked field goal on the last play of the first half, and they ended up rolling to the 45-0 victory. For the Patriots stats, Cam Newton went 12 of 19 for 69 yards. He had 1 touchdown and 0 interceptions, and he also had 14 carries for 48 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's continuing to be really effective on the ground. Jarrett Stidham went into the game when things got out of hand, and he went 2 for 3 for 61 yards and had a touchdown pass. Damian Harris had 16 carries for 80 yards. Gunnar Olszewski had a 38-yard touchdown catch by a throw from Jarrett Stidham, and Keel Harry had 2 catches for 15 yards and a touchdown. And for the Patriots defense, Adam Butler, Lawrence Guy, and Deatrich Wise had sacks, and J.C. Jackson and Chase Winovich had interceptions, and Devin McCourty had that 44-yard touchdown return off the blocked field goal. For the Chargers stats, Justin Herbert went 26 of 53 for 209 yards. He had 0 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, so not the best game by him. Austin Eckler had 8 carries for 36 yards and 4 catches for 32 yards. Keenan Allen had 5 catches for 48 yards. Mike Williams had 4 catches for 43 yards. Kenneth Murray had a sack, and Michael Badgley went 0 for 2 on his field goals, which helped the Patriots get the shutout. Up next, we'll be talking about the Philadelphia Eagles at the Green Bay Packers. The Packers ended up defeating the Eagles 30-16. The Eagles are now 3-8-1, and the Packers are 9-3, and continue to have their 3-game lead over the Vikings in the NFC North race. In this game, the Packers are up 23-3 with 11 minutes and 19 seconds left in the fourth quarter after a Mason Crosby 40-yard field goal. Then the Eagles scored 2 touchdowns in the span of 22 seconds to make the score 23-16. This was when Jalen Hurts went into the game, who took over for Carson Wentz. Jalen Hurts is going to be starting next week now too. But after that, when there was a chance for a Eagles comeback, the Packers ended up sealing the deal with a 77-yard touchdown run by Aaron Jones. And that was with 2 minutes and 36 seconds left in the game, which put the game out of reach. For the Eagles stats, Carson Wentz went 6 of 15 for 79 yards. He had 0 touchdowns and 0 interceptions, and he got benched for that performance in the third quarter. Jalen Hurts went 5 of 12 for 109 yards. He had 1 touchdown and 1 interception, and he had 5 carries for 29 yards. He brought a little life into the Eagles' offense when he replaced Carson Wentz. Miles Sanders had 10 carries for 31 yards. Dallas Goedert had 5 catches for 66 yards. Greg Ward had 3 catches for 57 yards and a touchdown. And for the Eagles defense, Javon Hargrove had a sack. And in this game, Jalen Reagor had a 73-yard punt return for a touchdown, which was the last Eagles score of the game, which had put the game originally within 7. But the Packers, like I said, ended up scoring that touchdown and putting the game away. For the Packers stats, Aaron Rodgers went 25 of 34 for 295 yards. He had 3 touchdowns and 0 interceptions, so he's continuing to impress this season and is in the running for the MVP race. Him and Patrick Mahomes are neck to neck in that right now. Aaron Jones had 15 carries for 130 yards and a touchdown. Devontae Adams had 10 catches for 121 yards and 2 touchdowns. Alan Lazard had 3 catches for 50 yards. Robert Tonyan had 4 catches for 39 yards and a touchdown. And the Packers defense played really well. They had 7 sacks, including 2 by Kingsley Keke, and Darnell Savage had an interception. The next game we'll be talking about is the Denver Broncos at the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs ended up prevailing in this game, defeating the Broncos 22-16. The Broncos are now 4-8, and the Chiefs improved to 11-1. This game ended up being closer than many people probably thought. It was a divisional game, so divisional games usually end up being close, since the teams play each other 2 times a year. The Chiefs improved their win streak against the Broncos. They've won 11 straight against them now. In this game, the Broncos were up 10-9 at halftime, and they were up 16-12 with 3:50 left in the third. But then the Chiefs scored the last 10 points to propel themselves to victory. There was also a play in the first half where Tyreek Hill actually caught a touchdown. It was a 40-plus yard touchdown, but he didn't know that he caught it, so the Chiefs ended up punting the ball, and they didn't challenge it, so that took 6 off the board. That would have gave the Chiefs a 9-3 lead in the second quarter. Andy Reid didn't challenge it because he said that they didn't really take a good look at it, and he never had a receiver not think he caught the ball when he did. Usually the receiver is like, oh, I caught it, so take a look at it and challenge it. For the Broncos stats, Drew Lock went 15 of 28 for 151 yards. He had 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Melvin Gordon had 15 carries for 131 yards. Noah Fant had 4 catches for 57 yards. Tim Patrick had 4 catches for 44 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Jeremiah Tauchu had a sack. For the Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes went 25 of 40 for 318 yards. He had 1 touchdown and 0 interceptions. Le'Veon Bell had 11 carries for 40 yards. Travis Kelce had 8 catches for 136 yards and a touchdown. Tyreek Hill had 6 catches for 58 yards. Tyrann Mathieu had 2 interceptions, and Harrison Butker went 5 for 5 on his field goals, including a long of 48 yards. Now I'll be talking about the Washington football team at the Pittsburgh Steelers. This was a upset game. The Washington football team ended up defeating the Steelers 23-17. This was a good win by the football team. They're now 5-7 and tied on top of the NFC East. And the Steelers get their first loss of the season. They fall to 11-9. 17-10 early in the fourth quarter, but then Washington scored 13 unanswered points after that to seal their victory. For Washington's stats, Alex Smith went 31 of 46 for 296 yards. He had 1 touchdown and 0 interceptions. He continues to play really well after that bounce back from his injury a couple years ago, so that's good to see. Peyton Barber had 14 carries for 23 yards and a touchdown. Logan Thomas had 9 catches for 98 yards and a touchdown. Cam Sims had 5 catches for 92 yards. J.D. McKissick had 10 catches for 70 yards. And John Bostic had an interception, which basically sealed the deal for the Washington win. Also, Dustin Hopkins went 3 for 3 on his field goals with a long of 49 yards. For the Steelers, Ben Roethlisberger went 33 of 53 for 305 yards. He had 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. Anthony McFarland Jr. had 4 carries for 15 yards. James Conner was out of this game with COVID. James Washington had 2 catches for 80 yards and a touchdown. Deontay Johnson had 8 catches for 71 yards and a touchdown. Eric Ebron had 7 catches for 68 yards. TJ Watt, Robert Spillane, and Stephon Tuitt had sacks for the Steelers. The 72 Dolphins can now pop their champagne bottles after the Steelers got their first loss of the season, since they're the only team to go undefeated for a full NFL season. The Patriots were really close to doing it the year they went 18-0 and then lost in the Super Bowl to the Giants. So, the 72 Dolphins' incredible season continues to live on as the only undefeated season. Next up, we'll be talking about the Buffalo Bills at the San Francisco 49ers. This game was technically played at the Cardinals Stadium since there's COVID restrictions in San Francisco, which pushed the home games for them away to the Cardinals Stadium. But the Bills ended up defeating the 49ers 34-24. The Bills are now 9-3 on the season, and the 49ers fall to 5-7. The Niners are up 7-0 at the end of the first quarter after a Brandon Ayuk 2-yard touchdown catch. But then the Bills ended up putting themselves up 17-7 at the half, and they scored 3 touchdowns in the second half to cruise to victory. For the Bills, Josh Allen went 32 of 40 for 375 yards. He had 4 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. Devin Singletary had 18 carries for 61 yards. Cole Beasley had 9 catches for 130 yards and a touchdown. Stephon Diggs had 10 catches for 92 yards. Gabriel Davis had 3 catches for 68 yards and a touchdown. Isaiah McKenzie had 2 catches for 31 yards and a touchdown. Dawson Knox had 4 catches for 27 yards and a touchdown. So, Josh Allen did a good job of spreading the ball around. The 4 touchdown passes he threw to 4 different receivers. For the Bills defense, Micah Hyde and Tre'Davious White had interceptions. For the 49ers, Nick Mullins went 26 of 39 for 316 yards. He had 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Jeff Wilson had 7 carries for 47 yards. Raheem Mostert had 9 carries for 42 yards. Brandon Ayuk had 5 catches for 95 yards and a touchdown. Deebo Samuel had 6 catches for 73 yards. Jordan Reed had 3 3 catches for 32 yards and a touchdown. Kyle Juszkiewicz had a 6-yard touchdown catch. And Deion Jordan had a sack for the 49ers. The final game I'll be talking about is the Tuesday night game between the Dallas Cowboys and the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens ended up cruising to victory, defeating the Cowboys 34-17. The Cowboys are now 3-9 on the season, and the Ravens improved to 7-5. The Ravens were up 17-10 at the half, and they scored 17 points in the second half versus the Cowboys 7 that they scored in the second half to roll to victory. For the Cowboys stats, Andy Dalton went 31 of 48 for 285 yards. He had 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. Ezekiel Elliott had 18 carries for 77 yards and 4 catches for 18 yards. Michael Gallup had 7 catches for 86 yards and a touchdown. Amari Cooper had 5 catches for 43 yards and a touchdown. Darian Thompson had an interception for the Cowboys. And Greg Zuerlein only went 1 for 4 on his field goals. So he didn't help the Cowboys at all. They could have had 9 more points on the board, which would have put them at 26 and within a 1-score game. But those are lost points that are crucial to the game, and if you can't make them, then it really hurts your team. For the Ravens, Lamar Jackson went 12 of 17 for 107 yards. He had 2 touchdowns and 1 interception, and he had 13 carries for 94 yards and a touchdown. So he was looking more effective this game, especially on the ground, which really helps the Ravens offense get rolling. The rushing game was a really crucial factor for the Ravens' victory. They were able to run all over the Cowboys' defense. Gus Edwards had 7 carries for 101 yards, and J.K. Dobbins had 11 carries for 71 yards and a touchdown. Marquise Brown had 5 catches for 39 yards and a touchdown. Miles Boykin had a 38-yard touchdown catch. Jahad Ward had a sack, and Patrick Queen had an interception. And Justin Tucker went 2 for 3 on his field goals. His missed field goal ended an NFL record of 70 straight field goals inside 40 yards. That's an insane record to have. He's the most accurate NFL kicker in history, making 90.7% of his field goals in his career. So those misses from him don't happen too much. And so the Ravens are lucky to have a kicker that clutch. Alright, so now I'll be doing my Week 14 NFL picks. We'll just do a little bit of sounds with these ping pong balls first though. So the first game actually already happened at the time I'm recording this. So I posted in the community tab before the game that I was picking the Patriots to defeat the Rams. But the Rams ended up having a dominant performance, especially on defense, and they ended up defeating the Patriots. So I'll talk more about that game in my next video, but congrats to the Rams on their victory. The Titans at the Jaguars. I'm going with the Titans in this game. They have too much to play for right now, especially with the Colts having the same record as them in the division. So I think they'll get it done and bounce back from their lackluster performance last week against the Browns, at least in the first half when they let things get away. But they did have that mini comeback surge in the second half of the game. The Vikings at the Buccaneers. The Vikings usually play well against good teams, but I'm gonna go with the Bucs in this game. I just don't trust the Vikings enough to win it, especially with the weird turnovers that the Vikings have been giving away lately, which result in touchdowns for the other team and keep them in the game. I think the Bucs are a complete enough team to defeat the Vikings and take advantage of any miscues that they have. The Vikings will have to play a perfect game if they want to get by this game, I believe. But I think it'll be a close game. The Chiefs at the Dolphins. This is a pretty intriguing matchup. The Dolphins have a really good defense that could give Patrick Mahomes some trouble. But I'm going to go with the Chiefs because they have so much offensive talent. I think they'll do enough to get the job done and wear out the Dolphins defense in the long run. The Dolphins are a tricky team to figure out. I definitely think they have a shot to win the game, but I just feel safer rolling with the Chiefs in this game. The Broncos at the Panthers. This is another hard game to pick. I'm going with the Panthers in this game, though. Both of these teams have been very inconsistent this season and riddled with injuries. Christian McCaffrey won't be playing in this game, but I'm just gonna go with the Panthers in this coin flip game. The Texans at the Bears. This could be a Deshaun Watson proof to the Bears game that they should have drafted him. I really would like to pick the Bears, but after last week's heartbreaker game, I just don't trust them enough to pick them. They haven't won since October 18th, so my Bears apparel's getting really dusty in my closet. I mean, I still do wear my Bears stuff around, but not as much as I would if they would win their games. It's been a tough season to watch, but I'm going with the Texans because that way I won't have to have any expectations for the Bears to win, and if they do win, it would just make my day that much better. The Cardinals at the Giants. This is a very intriguing game. The Giants defense has been playing really well, and it's believed that Daniel Jones will be back this week, which will help their offense even more. I had a really hard time picking this game, but I decided to go with the Cardinals in this game. Both these teams really need the win, but the Cardinals have been in a slump lately, and I think they really need to get out of that. So that's why I'm picking them. The Cowboys at the Bengals. Both of these teams have been dealing with their quarterback injuries, so it'll be a pretty fair matchup between the two, but I'm rolling with the Cowboys in this one. The game definitely could go either way because both offenses have a lot of talent, but I just decided to pick the Cowboys. The Colts at the Raiders. This is a crucial game for both teams, but I decided to pick the Colts because the Raiders have been very inconsistent lately. They got a beat down from the Falcons, and then it took them to the last play to beat the Jets. Cowboys and have fared better lately, so I think they'll pull out the victory. The Jets at the Seahawks. This is the second time in 2 weeks that the Seahawks are playing a New York team. I'm gonna go with the Seahawks in this game. I think the Jets are gonna be a mess after letting that touchdown happen against the Raiders at the end of the game. I think the Seahawks will make this a get-right game after their poor performance on offense last week. The Packers at the Lions. The Lions got a nice comeback victory last week, but usually the Packers end up beating the Lions. It just seems like the Packers beat the Lions and the Bears in the division a lot, and they usually split with the Vikings, so that's why I'm gonna go with the Packers, because they usually rule their division every year for the most part. The Falcons at the Chargers. The Chargers looked like a mess after the last game in their shutout loss to the Patriots. Anthony Lynn, their head coach, is on the hot seat. I think the Falcons will pull out the victory on this one because the Chargers are really starting to trend downward towards the end of the season. And the Falcons have a good capability of pulling out a good win. It just depends on which Falcons team shows up. Julio Jones won't be playing in this game, but I feel like this game it'll be the good Falcons that show up. Washington at the 49ers. I'm gonna go with Washington in this game because they're right in the thick of things in the NFC East, leading on top with a 5-7 record, along with the Giants. The 49ers definitely have a shot to win this game, but I don't trust Nick Mullins enough to prevent the turnovers that he's been throwing a lot lately against a good Washington defense. So that's why I'm going with the Washington football team. The Saints at the Eagles. Jalen Hurts is going to be making his first start against the Saints, but the Saints are so well coached and have such a good defense, and Taysom Hill's starting to pick up the offense really well, so I'm going with the Saints in this game. They have a lot to play for in getting that NFC first round bye in the playoffs. The Steelers at the Bills. This is a really good game on paper. I think it'll be a close one. The Steelers usually end up beating the really good teams and struggle against the mediocre teams. But I'm going to have to go with the Bills still in this game because they've been looking really good lately. Josh Allen has really been playing well, and the Bills' offense has been moving the ball well as a whole, and their defense has been really good. The Steelers definitely have a well-balanced team, but they've been struggling these past couple games at least. So that's why I'm going with the Bills in this game. And the final game is the Ravens at the Browns. This is a really tough game to pick as well. Seems like usually the Steelers and the Ravens take care of the Browns in their division, but the Browns have been looking really good lately. Baker Mayfield had a really good game last week with 4 touchdown passes in the first half, and their 1-2 punch running game has been looking well. But like I is that it just seems like the Ravens and the Steelers usually take care of the Browns. And I feel like the Ravens need this win more than the Browns do to get back into things in the AFC playoff race. The AFC is looking really good, and all those spots are getting filled in the playoffs. I believe the 7th seed is 8-5,